to do this time is make sure that the lens is aimed, because it just like clipped the top of my head the whole time. Which, I mean, it's not like anything I do is. Looks like it's aimed at me. I'll move it down a little bit. Trouble is, sometimes I just film my stomach the whole time, and you don't really want to do that. Maybe up whoa, that's neat. See, this camera has a gimbal. Oh, I better not film students, but so like if you could set it so that it would track you. You could see that it's doing that. And that's something.
Is that yours? Or the
No, I stole.
No, I mean yours or the school's.
Oh, it's mine.
Oh, okay. How much was it? If you don't mind.
Something like $259.
I'm gonna have to put that on the list.
I got another list.
Right,
No, this is I think they still make it, but it's DJI, so
I like
that means
it's got
that
gimbal, so I can rotate it like this. Cause I want to draw and be able to video my art for my friends. Cause I'm teaching a couple of my friends how to draw, and I think that would make my life 1,000 times easier.
no, I for years had a flip camera, which you just turned it on, and then when you were ready to upload it, you just had like a flip that came out, and you stuck it into your computer, and it uploaded.
I remember those days.
And I think I got like 1,000 videos on YouTube thanks to that. But it started. The colors are just outlandishly neon on the screen now. Something I haven't checked is actually how does it look on the YouTube I might have to do that. Even though it looks terrible on the screen, it might actually be okay.
I don't know how to do it, but you can run it through a filter too on YouTube. Change the contrast if you're worried about those neon.
So anyway, it's like actually after 10 o'clock.
Holy
So
crap.
I will
Where is
start.
everyone?
Where does the time go? Oh, I screwed that up. But there's a great song. I think it was Judy Collins wrote that years ago, where she stole it from somebody and sang it beautifully. But in any case, good morning. Couple of things. The quiz question that I asked you, I of course went home and puzzled it out myself, and it brings up lots of interesting things that we need to mention. I think some of it I mentioned, but in any case, and I could check my videos from last class to see if I mentioned it or not, although what I noticed was that the way the camera uploaded them to my computer, they were not in sequence. So when I label them A, B, C, D, E for I sent them to you, but D I believe is actually A.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
So they're not in order, but that doesn't really matter. But the issue here is if you say for anything you pick, X is a person, and it's not in the room. So that would mean no one is in the room. But of course the problem is in the real world situation where you have someone saying that person's in the room. So what you really need to say in English is no one else is in the room. And by the way, that's something about the way we usually speak, is we use universals much more than I think other kinds of things. To say things that if you put that into a computer code, the computer would go nuts. Because, wait a minute, who's saying that? Somebody has to be in the room, so it can't be the case that there's no one in the room. So you end up then, well, okay, so now I have to say, well, there is someone in the room, but I still want to say no one else is in the room. And so what do I have to do? Well, I have to use a different variable. I can't use the same variable. That just by the way the grammar and everything works, that's not going to be possible. So, but you can have lots of different variables. So the next variable that you could use would be y, typically. Oh, that's interesting. And I also want to say there exists a person as opposed to for anything you pick. And so I'm going to use a particular quantifier, the existing quantifier. And I noticed some of the folks that emailed me their response, they actually had a backward E. I'm jealous. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah.
I just use a forward E, because, well, it's capital E, heck. But so you want to say that there exists a Y such that a person, Y is a person, and Y is in the room. That was something I didn't actually stress when I talked about the 4 statement types. You notice in those 4 statement types that the A statement is expressed as for anything you pick, if it is the subject, then it is the predicate, or whatever, right? And it's an if-then statement, right? And the same thing, because you couldn't, if you said, for example, for anything you pick, it is both a person and not in the room, then what you'd be saying is there's no desks, there's no, basically you're by saying and, you're saying everything is basically also not in the room. So it would be like a vacuum, I suppose, whatever. So you want to be specific to just persons, right? So A and E statements, the 2 universal statements, are always in conditional form. If it is this subject, then it is there. But when you go to the particular statements, the I and the O statement, then we use a conjunction. We say that there exists something that is both a person and in the room, right? So you use, and it's kind of interesting. You could go through proofs that show that you can actually go from the one and remember we could use quantifier exchange, right? And when you do that, you end up having to go through the steps where you have to change the statement to a conditional statement instead of a conjunction. So it's like about
This is why I like the
10
diagrams.
It's like 10 to 20 steps, 10 to 20 steps practically, depending on the complexity of the statement. I haven't talked about how complex statements can get. You can use this system in order to translate into symbols everyday speech. And everyday speech is, this is a translation skill that people have to develop. When you're learning this language, how do you handle, the everyday things that people say and translate it into the kind of code that, of course, today can be used in a computer situation, right? So that's interesting that A and E statements are conditionals, at least usually, right? If you say something like, nothing exists, wait a minute, what on earth are you talking about? When you get to, like, Gödel's ontological argument, I wasn't going to talk about this, but here I am. All right, let's use this link. And what's the ontological argument? I forget. Didn't we talk a little bit about it? And that is that God is that than which nothing greater can be thought. Therefore, God must exist. So we've got that. You can see that here. Therefore, God must exist. Yeah, okay, Leibniz, yes, history, outline. But so when we get to Gödel, though, what's he going to do? He's going to put this into uh, quantificational logic. And so what do you get? Okay, so you go down a little bit. So symbolic notation, right? I know axiom 1, right? Okay, so number 1, he's, in this particular example, the way the symbols work is that you usually would have a variable here. And the list of variables that you could use are things like x, y, z. And if you run out, with just 3, you can like backtrack. There's a way. Certain letters are decided. These are specific individuals. So whenever we see Socrates as a person, you could have P subscript S.
Is
right?
that why E is backwards? So that way E backwards always means what E backwards
Yes,
means?
yes. Although, well, it depends on the font, I suppose. Here we have it. But notice X is a variable, but when you're saying any variable you pick, the added fun here is that they use Greek letters to reference any variable you pick. So instead of saying P subscript X, and I notice some people also put the subscript in parentheses, which is obviously that's being used. Wasn't the way Copy or Hurley used. I don't know what they're doing today because I haven't bought the newest textbook because, well, they usually send them to me for free anyway, but I haven't asked for one because I thought, no one in their right mind is going to ask me to teach logic anymore, obviously someone who's not in their right mind did select me to teach this course this semester. And I'm glad. They just, but in any case, so in this case, phi is a Greek letter that obviously means for anything, any variable that you would throw in here, we have, and this is our first axiom, right? Or, for anything you pick, if x is phi, a specific x is phi, right? Then psi is x, so therefore psi is p. Now, I can't put that into English because he's just saying this is an axiom and has no bearing on anything you might say in actual English.
So wait,
Colin.
does parentheses mean equal to, like equivalent? You said
Parentheses?
No, it's like a set kind of.
I don't have an equal to here. This I'm reading as a conditional statement. So if this, then that, and if all of this, then that.
What do you mean by
by
P is phi though? Or did maybe I heard
So I don't have a dictionary here.
So it's saying
So I think it's so abstract.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to jump in here and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's saying all things that P is in relation to phi, or that in relation to X's relation to P is so on and so forth. Like that, the parentheses is just like math, man, where you put in X, 3, parentheses, 1, 2, whatever, in the middle, you have to multiply all those things by X3, right?
Okay, so it's less of like a function of like that we.
It's a relationship.
Let's look at the conclusion here because I know what the conclusion is. God
Sorry.
exists, right? And what you can see is there exists an X such that
There it is.
it's God, right? So X is God.
It boils down to exactly what we discussed in class. If all things are God, then God exists. That statement.
That's actually giving me a headache here, trying to figure this going backwards. But the reason I pulled this up wasn't for us to analyze Gödel's argument,
Right.
but basically to talk about the structure of these symbolic symbols when you put them into speech. God exists. Okay, I can figure that one out because I know how the argument goes. But this, I'm assuming P would be predicate,
That's what I'm thinking.
and so